let's take a little time to talk about what's happening in that congressional testimony. You brought up Tulsi Gabbard, her testimony about nuclear weapons, and there you have a situation where, first of all, the Palestinians are getting slaughtered, and they don't have nuclear weapons, and they don't have any big power behind them, and where the ruse really is Iran and trying to get the U.S. to follow Netanyahu's inspiration and leadership to go to war with Iran, which most people think would be an absolute disaster on 20 different accounts. But you have some insight into that because you know Tulsi Gabbard. She was asked about this. There's a new classified or security evaluation. So why don't we switch over to that topic number two for this Tuesday?
Sounds good.
Take it away.
Well, the annual intelligence community threat assessment was tabled today. It's available on their website, the DNI, Director of National Intelligence website. And more important, Tulsi Gabbard led off with 15 minutes of testimony. Uh, it's just three hours ago that this happened. I took copious notes as I'm used to doing here, and let me just take you through some of the things before we get to the big point. What she said about Iran. Okay, the first thing to note is that she was very. She was asked, "What about the environment?" For the last several years, decade or so, you led off with the national security implications of the environment, military implications. What about it? You don't mention it this time. Well, she had a hard time ducking that one. Obviously, it doesn't buy chips with President Trump to talk about the environment. Okay, so number two, what did she start out with? Well, she said there are two things. There are mini threats, and then there is uh, two major states that we have to confront. Okay, now how about the mini threats? The border, fentanyl, sex trafficking, cyber things on the border. I mean, hello, yeah. Usually, the director of national intelligence defers to Homeland Security or to the FBI to talk about those things. But no, she wants to make sure that the border is front and center. Finally, she gets to Russia, China, I- Iran, and North Korea. Now, China is the biggest threat. Everybody says so. The Pentagon says so. We're preparing because China wants to replace us as the indispensable country in the world. Can you imagine? Oh my God! That reminds me of the first speech that Biden made on China. It was 4 years ago, almost exactly. And he said, China aspires to be not only the most economic and most powerful economic and but they want to replace us as the most powerful country in the world. And you know what? That's not going to happen on my watch. Well, you know, from a layman's point of view, or even from an intelligence analyst point of view, why not? I mean, like there are 1.5 billion people there. They're building up their military in response to what they see as the threat from the United States, and they are already the most powerful economic center in the world. So don't fight it. Well, anyhow, the whole Weltanschauung, the whole world view here is informed by the need for the United States to be the most exceptional, the most indispensable country in the world. That's our problem with China. And actually, Tulsi Gabbard does say something about, well, their striving to be so powerful is, quote, driven in part by what they see the U.S. doing and what U.S. policy is toward China. Oh, well, that's right, Tulsi. Nice that you mentioned that. What else? Export ban. Russia Russia has lots of nukes. Did you know that? More nukes than anybody. And they're going to, well, they're going to just keep doing what they're doing. So that's Russia. Now, Iran. Here's the interesting thing, and I wanted to sort of do this the way they approach in Congress here. So Iran comes up, and Tulsi Gabbard says, the Iran has missiles, lots of sophisticated missiles, and with respect to the nuclear problem, well, they are not building a nuclear weapon. We are monitoring it very, very closely. They may reauthorize work on a nuclear weapon, which we in the intelligence community verified had stopped in 2003. They may reauthorize it, says Tulsi Gabbard, but if they do, we'll monitor. We're monitoring it closely just in case they do that. Okay. Now, what's the what's the actual reading in the text of the threat assessment? It's really important because if
You should
Trump wants
explain
to
to
go get
people to you listening to this what this a threat assessment is
okay,
and its
yeah,
power to drive policy. And again, I want to bring it back because you raised the question of Israel and the Gaza war and so forth. Netanyahu's ruse to get the U.S. even more committed to his plan for uh, eliminating the Palestinians is
that's
somehow
exactly
to get a war going with Iran and give it a larger significance for global powers. So why the U.S. should be bogged down in that area? That's really the argument. Was if you get to war with Iran, you're bogged down for a long time, and they have a lot of ways of pursuing that. After all, they're the ones that
mhm,
defeated Iraq when we were on Iraq's side,
right.
and so in order to make that argument that there's a vital U.S. interest in going along with Netanyahu's greater, not only greater Israel, greater plan for the Mid East, you have to knock out Iran. And it does seem that Tulsi Gabbard's testimony and the threat assessment takes the main prop out or justification for that aggression towards Iran, the nuclear weapon.
That's correct, except the press will not pick up on that, Bob. There's no emphasis on that. In other words, Mike Waltz, as recently as 2 days ago, said, "Well, we're going to get Iran. We're going to get Iran. If they threaten to use nuclear weapons, we're going to get them, get them, get them." Now it's pushing an open door, right? Because what the intelligence community, to its credit, you can criticize a lot of stuff, but to its credit, the scientists, the engineers, and the analysts all stood fast on this judgment that Iran is not working on the nuclear weapon part of this equation. Yeah, uranium enrichment up to kazoo, okay, but no nuclear weapon. So, how long will it take to get a nuclear weapon? Bill Burns, in a fit of honesty, maybe to atone for his many sins and lies, before he went out of office, he said, we reiterate that Iran is not working on a nuclear weapon. And if they do, we can verify that they've done so right quick, very, very quickly. So you're right, Bob. This whole thing pulls the rug out under this argument that we have to confront Iran. And that's why I want to read these few sentences that come directly out of the threat assessment and, as I say again, are consistent with the judgment in the National Intelligence Estimate done in November 2007. So count the years. Here's what it says: we continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and that Khamenei has not reauthorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003 through pressure. Okay, although pressure has probably built on him to do so. Okay, there has been erosion of the decades long taboo about discussing nuclear weapons in public in Iran. And that has emboldened some nuclear weapons advocates within Iran's decision making apparatus. But Khamenei remains the final decision maker over Iran's nuclear program, to include any decision to develop nuclear weapons, period, end quote. So the supreme leader, there's a fatwa, a religious edict against this, and we have monitoring devices up the kazoo, not only in the laboratories but in satellite thing. We will find out right away. So when Waltz and Rubio and the others say, "Oh, we got to stop this nuclear weapons program," they are lying through their teeth. And here is the intelligence community remaining firm. And Bob, I think it's supported very much by the military community because our top generals and admirals criticize them as I do. At least they know which end is up, and they don't want to get into a war with Iran, which they would definitely lose, short of using nuclear weapons to destroy the whole country. So this is good news because Gabbard
Why
is,
would
is
they lose it?
well, because there's no way that Israel would prevail in a war against Iran.
You
It's
mean
just,
Israel just with U.S. support? But what about U.S. military support for Israel? That's what Israel wants. They don't
yeah,
want to
that
do it
would, and
alone.
that would not, well, that's not going to happen. See, okay? In other words, most people, and I'm an outlier on this, they say, well, this could happen. Netanyahu may just take off after Iran like he's always threatened to. Well, that's true. I don't think the chances are very large. But if he does, I think that Trump and Witkoff and those guys are smart enough to say, look, we don't want to get involved into another war that we're going to lose. And we don't want Israel, our wonderful ally, to get blasted to hell because Iran has a deterrent now and they will use it. They've already demonstrated their capability to shoot hypersonic missiles well into Israel to destroy some of their airfields. So uh, I think that Gabbard, for once, and the military, who I think is cheering her on, say, "Stay firm, stay firm." If Trump wants to support Netanyahu in a fool's errand against Iran, well, just don't let the American people believe that it's because Iran is working on a nuclear weapon, which it is not. So I find great hope in the fact that my former colleagues, at least in this instance, have stayed close to this. Bob, this goes back to when Cheney and Bush were about to exit the scene. 2007. That's when this estimate came out saying that Iran had stopped working on a nuclear weapon in 2003 and had not resumed work. That was unanimous, expressed with great confidence. What did Bush do? He went off to Israel, apologized. He apologized for that estimate, and he said, "Oh, I don't agree with it." And then he wrote a book, and he must have written these pages in the book because he said, "This was a bummer. This is the fly in the ointment." His words exactly. How could I justify ordering our military to attack the nuclear facilities of a country that the intelligence community says has no active nuclear weapons program? Bummer, I couldn't do it. And so we missed our chance to go out in glory in 2008, having started another war on behalf of Israel.
Well, but the fact is that he invented the nuclear weapons that allowed him to go to war with Iraq. So clearly, I just want to end this great, interesting session. But you made a point before about the threat from China, the threat from anyone. But the fact is, we have a subtext here. Uh, China can't, and I'm not surprised why they think we have to defeat them militarily or anything, because clearly we are now operating on the idea that there's a higher power that very much favors the United States in any international dispute. A higher power that obviously only reads English, can't possibly understand Mandarin. And so I'm hoping that out of some of this mystical, magical thinking that we hear in the air all the time, there might be actually a plea, let's leave it, which was supposed to be the original idea of the creation of Israel, after all, in the eyes of some Orthodox Jews, there's God's will and not ordinary humans that are supposed to be doing these things. So maybe I know you have a religious background to some degree. You went to a Jesuit, was it a Jesuit college at Fordham?
That's
And
correct.
so maybe part of the sanity in all this will be that we don't have to always reorder the world, that maybe we can let different people in the world find their own ways to manage their affairs. Anyway, thanks for our weekly chat, Ray McGovern, former 27 years as a key Russian analyst at the CIA, and I can't claim any such history. I tried to expose what you guys were doing when I thought it was nefarious. I'm glad that in our dotage, we get to have these conversations. I want to thank Joshua Shear, our producer, Diego Ramos for writing the introduction, Max Jones for putting up the video. I want to thank the JKW Foundation for providing some funding for this, along with Integrity Media, Len Goodman, and in this group in Chicago that helps us in this respect. See you next time. Maybe won't don't have to only do it on Tuesdays. Events are moving so rapidly. If something happens in either one of these stories, particularly, uh, we can chat again this week. So we'll see you next time with another edition of Sheer Post, the Bob and Ray Show.
Thanks, Bob.
Yep.